acid, nitric acid, and the hydrochloric acid, which we did in detail. And the organic acids, we did one last time, that was the carbolic acid. And today we'll be starting off with the second one, that is the oxalic acid. So we'll, in the end, if there is time, we'll recall more details about the first lecture. But starting off with the today's lecture, which is on oxalic acid. Okay, so oxalic acid is also known by the name of acid of sugar or wood sorrel or wood bleach, all three names pertaining to oxalic acid. And why this is named? Because it is isolated from a flowering plant of genus Oxalis. From that, the name has been derived from as oxalic acid. And if we tell you about the physical properties, oxalic acid is a corrosive substance. It is usually colorless, it is transparent, it is crystalline, and it is prismatic. And it is the naturally occurring component of plants, and it is found in relatively very large amounts in the leaves of dark green leafy foods. For example, the beet leaves, the spinach, rhubarb leaves, and parsley. So if you, the portion of the plant which you can consume safely is the fleshy part, and the leaves itself are mildly poisonous if you consume those in large amounts. Then it is somewhat similar in physical appearance to magnesium sulfate and zinc sulfate. So you have to differentiate between the two. Why? Because we'll see later that if a person, suppose if he has consumed large amount of magnesium sulfate and he has got the symptoms, that itself would not be that dangerous as compared to oxalic acid, which, as the saying goes of Christensen saying, which is a very famous saying, he was a scientist or someone who made a lot of, studied a lot of cases of oxalic acid poisoning, and his verdict depicts the criteria for the clinical diagnosis. And oxalic acid, he says that suppose if a person after swallowing a crystalline substance, which tastes strongly acidic and is seized by violent vomiting and pain in the stomach, and immediately he has signs of collapse like feeble pulse and sweating and all that. So, and he dies within, you can say within an hour or even less than that. So there is no doubt that it is anything other than oxalic acid. So you see how dangerous it is if it is consumed in a certain amount, and how fast the reaction is. And you have to give immediate treatment if you have to save the life of the person. So that's why we have to differentiate, because physical properties, look-wise, they are similar to magnesium sulfate. So if we tell you the salient features of the differences, you can say the taste of oxalic acid is sour and acidic. Magnesium sulfate is very bitter. The reaction of oxalic acid is strongly acidic. So if you just do a litmus test, the blue litmus would change into red if it is acidic, and obviously if it is oxalic acid. And it will be neutral in reaction if it is magnesium sulfate. There are 2 or 3 other things which are not that important, but from a bookish point of view, you should know that if oxalic acid on heating with the ink stain, the stains, they disappear, or there's a bleaching effect. With magnesium sulfate, it is not to be seen. And on heating with sodium, the oxalic acid sublimes, magnesium sulfate does not do so. On heating with bicarbonate, the oxalic acid, there's a lot of bubbles or effervescence, while it is not to be seen in magnesium sulfate. So these are 1 or 2 or 3 main features where you can differentiate between the two. Now, if you come to the uses, main use of oxalic acid is as an ink remover. So it is used to remove, you can say, signatures and writings from the documents. And this is also one of the most important medical legal importance of oxalic acid, that in case of forgery, it can be used to remove the writings and all that. Then as a bleaching agent in industries and chemical processes and bleaching and dyeing, it is used. It is used as a rust remover also. So stains of rust and blood can be removed because it forms soluble chelates with iron. So you can remove those also. Then moving on to the sign and symptoms. There are 2 distinct reactions you can say. One is that oxalic acid acts locally, that is as a corrosive. If it acts as a corrosive, the sign and symptoms are not that obvious on the skin, but mucous membrane of the alimentary tract is affected remotely. If there is absorption into the blood, it will affect the several systems like the CVS, the GIT, and the kidney, you can say. Now, the main sign symptom, they present in 3 forms, you can say. So if you divide it into 3 forms, you'll be able to recognize it very easily, and accordingly this management would be given. One is the fulminating type. That is with large doses. For example, if you give 15 grams or more of oxalic acid is consumed orally, then it will produce immediate symptoms leading to death within minutes. That is how fast the death is. That's why, like we said earlier, that you have to give the management very quickly. You have to diagnose it and you have to give the management very quickly. Sign and symptoms of the fulminating with large doses would be, there'll be burning, there'll be sour, acidic taste in the mouth, there'll be a sense of constriction around the throat and burning pain leading from the mouth to the stomach and radiating all over the abdomen. There'll be a lot of nausea, there'll be a lot of irritation, and this will immediately followed by exact vomiting. And vomiting, you will see it will contain a lot of altered blood and mucus. That's why it is known that the vomitus of oxalic acid, it is like coffee ground in appearance. You've seen coffee, if you ground it, you can see the appearance and you have the similarity with oxalic acid vomiting. So it will be altered blood, it will be black in color therefore, and this will be followed by severe thirst and diarrhea. If diarrhea, vomiting, all these occur, obviously there'll be electrolyte imbalance and ultimately leading to death. That would be the fulminating effect. Then if you talk about the acute symptoms, if there's acute poisoning, then there'll be, like you can say, the main feature would be hypocalcemia. Okay, this was the generalized, but I have divided it into 3 to make it much more easier for you rather than the generalized concept. Okay, then if you see there's an acute poisoning symptoms, then there'll be hypocalcemia would be the main feature of an acute case of poisoning. And why? Because oxalic acid, it has a high affinity for calcium. So whenever there is a lot of, you have consumed oxalic acid, it will combine with the serum calcium and it will form insoluble calcium oxalate. And because of the features of hypocalcemia, there'll be a lot of tingling and numbness of the fingers, the limbs, generalized facial, you can say, twitching and hyperexcitability. There'll be weakness, there'll be paresthesia, and there'll be carpopedal spasm. Now, this carpopedal spasm is also known as the Ecorcher's hand or the Trousseau's sign. Why? I repeat it. What you see in the diagrammatic representation, this is the typical feature you can see of an Ecorcher's hand or the Trousseau's sign. Trousseau's sign, what happens is that the hands are flexed at the wrist, the fingers are flexed at the metacarpophalangeal joints, and there is extension of the interphalangeal joints, and the thumb is adducted to the palm. This is how it looks like. And how you can elicit this response? By induction of the carpopedal spasm by inflation of a sphygmomanometer above the systolic blood pressure maintained for 3 minutes. So you'll be able to, if there's hypocalcemia, this is how it will look like. Then the other sign, which you can see at the bottom of the slide, is the Chvostek sign, which is also known as the Weiss sign, W-E-I-S-S sign. W-E-I-S-S. It is also known as the Weiss sign or the Chvostek sign. What happens here? There's hyperexcitability of the peripheral nerves. There is tetany. There is a lot of contraction of the ipsilateral facial muscle. And how it is elicited? By tapping the facial nerve just 2 centimeters anterior to the the external auditory meatus, that is the ear. And if you tap it, you will have all the twitchings and you will see the ipsilateral twitching of the face and the lips and all that. So this is the Chvostek sign. Okay. moving on, first we'll do the delayed poisoning effect. Here the slide is not there. So delayed poisoning, what happens that if there is the death is not rapid, for example, if he has not consumed that much amount of oxalic acid, then there will be evidence of irritation of the kidney. There will be a nephrotoxic action. There will be findings of uremia. The urine would be scanty, and traces of albumin you can see in and blood, and calcium oxalate you can see in the urine. Now, another characteristic finding of oxalic acid poisoning would be that if the oxalate crystals appear in the urine, it is known as oxaluria. The characteristic finding would be that these crystals would be envelope-shaped crystals that you can observe easily when seen under the microscope. So presence of calcium oxalate crystals in the urine, which is known as oxaluria and which is envelope-shaped in cases of oxalic acid, would be very obvious and if seen under the microscope. Fatal dose is usually 15 to 20. Fatal period, like we said, it can be 1 or 2 hours. It can be even earlier. If it's on to renal failure, then it will take about 2 days to 2 weeks. Okay. Now, the treatment. Now, since the degree of corrosion, like we said, is not as severe as mineral acids, so a soft stomach tube can be passed with care, and you can use lime water, which is calcium hydroxide in water. But caution is that warm water should not be used for stomach wash, as it may dissolve more acid. So you have to use the normal based water and not use warm water. As an antidote, any calcium preparation can be used. Like we said, it has a high affinity for calcium. So obviously, any calcium preparation, even the normal chalk that you have available at home, but it cannot be given as such. Chalk, you have to make a suspension. For example, 30-gram chalk suspension dissolved in water or milk will neutralize, you can say, about 20 grams of oxalic acid. So that will be the immediate. If you have nothing there, you can give that. Alkalis as such as soda or potash or ammonia should not be used, as their oxalates are soluble. So there'll be more absorption and more damage done. So alkalis are not to be used. Then calcium gluconate can be given either orally by mouth or by an intravenous route. Demulcents you can give. Demulcents are just substances which form a mucoprotective layer on the mucous membrane, and they prevent the absorption. So any demulcents like egg white beaten or milk can be given. The urinary output should be monitored to detect the possibility of renal damage, and the fluid intake should be controlled. Rest is all supportive or symptomatic measures that you can adopt. Then post-mortem findings are that suppose if the poison is taken in the concentrated form, so signs of corrosion would be seen, but the exception would be the lips and the chin. The lips and the chin do not show the staining. The usual staining is not seen in the lips and chin. Mucous membrane, the tongue, the mouth, the throat, they are usually white and they appear as if they are bleached. Okay, that will give you the whitish appearance of the mucous membrane. But they can sometimes be reddening. The mucous membrane may be red if there is a lot of irritation there. Stomach, if you see, the stomach contains a dark brown gelatinous liquid due to the formation of acid hematin, and mucous membrane is usually, it is very corroded, it is very reddened, and they are punctate due to the erosions. So this will give the appearance of a velvety red appearance, or sometimes a blackish appearance to the mucous membrane of the stomach. The wall of the stomach is usually very softened, but there is no perforation. If you recall, when we did the sulfuric acid, we said the maximum perforation of the stomach which occurs out of all the acids, you can say, is because of the sulfuric acid, in sulfuric acid, because the stomach there is literally very corroded, it is very softened, and therefore in sulfuric gastric lavage is contraindicated. Even the EMIS says that the gastric lavage is highly contraindicated. Although some authors, even I think I have mentioned that a very soft leaf-lined tube can be inserted, but usually caution should be taken in case of sulfuric acid poisoning. So here that we see there is a velvety red or a blackish appearance because of the erosions in the mucous membrane of the stomach. And although the wall is softened, but usually perforation does not take place. Kidney is also swollen, it is congested. The tubules, if you see on histology, they will show the oxalate crystals, especially in the proximal tubules, they are highly necrosed and all that. The rest of the viscera are all congested. The medico-legal importance, if you see, of oxalic acid, one we have mentioned that because a fatal accident can result, because like we already did in detail, that oxalic acid can be substituted for magnesium sulfate because the physical properties are quite alike. So you have to differentiate that. And in case of a magnesium sulfate, it is a cathartic. So you have to make the diagnosis very earlier. Mild forms of poisoning, like we said, you can get, although the vegetables like rhubarb and parsley and all these spinach, they are very safe vegetables. But if you eat the green leafy part, that is the leaves of the vegetables, they can lead to a mild poisoning effect. So better to avoid that. Suicidal poisoning is uncommon. Homicide is also extremely rare owing to its bitter taste, which is very difficult to con someone into swallowing the oxalic acid because of its taste and all that. But one of the most important medico-legal importance, like we said, is to remove the writings and the signatures in case of forgeries and all that. So, and also it is sometimes used as an abortifacient also, occasionally to produce criminal abortion. Okay. So moving on, the next, now we have finished with the, no, there's one more, this is salicylic acid. This is also an inorganic acid. Now, the reason of adding salicylic acid here is, although it is a therapeutic poison, and it is usually a taxonomic error to include salicylic acid here with the corrosives. It is not, because it is not a very true corrosive, you can say, in the true sense of the word. It is not a typical corrosive. It is an irritant effect. It causes great irritation of the mucous membrane of the stomach and all that. But here, some of the authors, they include salicylic acid because if it causes a great deal of irritation of the mucous membrane, it could cause a lot of erosion and damaging effects. So the most important therapeutic preparation of salicylic acid is like sodium salicylate and methyl salicylate, which is also known as oil of wintergreen, and especially the acetyl salicylic acid, which comes by the name of aspirin. So mainly we'll be doing the salicylic acid. These are the physical appearance of sodium salicylate. It is odorless, white, scaly crystals with an unpleasant saline taste. Acetyl salicylic acid is an odorless, it is a white crystalline powder tasting the same as sodium salicylate, while methyl salicylate is the colorless liquid form with the aromatic odor and the sweetish taste. Mainly these are used as an antipyretic to reduce fever, and as an anti-rheumatic. Salicylic acid is also used as a keratolytic agent. Like we said, it is an taxonomic error to include this as a corrosive. It is powerful irritants. So one of the most important common household remedies in fever is aspirin, which is usually a common household name. Almost every household carries it, although now a safer option is with paracetamol, which is acetaminophen. So aspirin use has decreased as far as analgesic is concerned because of its effects. And also because it is a purchased over-the-counter drug, so a lot of people carry this at home. So signs and symptoms, they usually result from poisoning due to overdose of aspirin, or you can say idiosyncrasy. Idiosyncrasy is just the individual hypersensitiveness of an individual to a drug or a food. So a lot of idiosyncrasy is seen with this drug. Then usually the sign and symptoms ranging from the gastrointestinal symptoms to a lot of, because like we said, aspirin is a great irritant of the mucous membrane of the stomach. So due to erosion of the gastric mucosa, there is a lot of epigastric pain and vomiting. There is GI bleeding and GI hemorrhage. And this leads to usually a hypoprothrombemia, and there is a lot of chances of bleeding. Then pulmonary, which is known as the salicylic dyspnea, there is a lot of hyperapnea. Why? Because this is a very important, you can say, indication of aspirin poisoning. And mainly it is due to a direct stimulation of the respiratory center by aspirin. So there is increased rate and depth of respiration. A lot of carbon dioxide is breathed off. This hyperventilation that occurs, this in turn produces, you can say, respiratory alkalosis. So there is a lot of acid-base disturbance, and then followed by severe acidosis, because obviously the alkali reserve have been used up and all that. So there is a lot of ketosis, albuminuria, glycosuria, and all that. If there is that ketosis, obviously the breath will smell of acetone, and there can be a mistaken diagnosis of diabetic coma. So if CNS symptoms are seen, then there is a lot of tinnitus, that is the ringing or a buzzing sound in the ear. There is deafness, there is vertigo, there is hallucination, convulsions, and salicylate jag. So what is salicylate jag? It is a form of delirium in which severe cases of poisoning with aspirin, you see these symptoms where there is a lot of restlessness, delirium, mania, hallucination, and there are generalized convulsions to be seen. And these mental aberrations are reminiscent of alcohol intoxication or hysteria, you can say sometimes. So a mistake in diagnosis is possible. So you have to differentiate that also. Then renal, we have already discussed, there'll be proteinuria and tubular necrosis, there'll be hypovolemia, hypoprothrombonemia. Because of that, there'll be a lot of bleeding and all that. Potassium would be decreased, so there'll be hypokalemia. Metabolic dysfunctions, there'll be hyperpyrexia would be seen in cases of aspirin poisoning. And why there is hyperpyrexia? Because there'll be an increase, there'll be a compensatory increase in the body metabolism, and there'll be a substrate breakdown. This response usually is manifested by increased oxygen consumption, and this would lead to hyperpyrexia. Also, sometimes there is, you can say, paratonic and extreme muscular rigidity, and further contributing to the hyperthermia, and there is increased risk of rhabdomyolysis. So a lot of breakdown of proteins and the things like that. Okay. So usual fatal dose is 70 to 80 gram in case of salicylic acid. Diagnose, you can diagnose it by a test which is known as a Lee-Jones. This is a spelling mistake. This is Lee-Jones, J-O-N-E-S, not P, but O, J-O-N-E-S. You can correct that. Lee-Jones test. Lee-Jones test is just a test where you can make out whether the diagnosis is that. Even the Lee-Jones test is not only used for aspirin or salicylic acid, it is also used in cases of cyanide poisoning also. And what you do is you just add a few crystals of ferric sulfate to about 5 ml of gastric aspirate if you have that. And in that you just add 5 drops of 2% sodium hydroxide and boil it, cool it, then further add 10 drops of 10% hydrochloric acid, a bit of a long process. And how you interpret it? If you get a greenish blue color, this would be cyanide, diagnostic of cyanide poisoning. And if you get a purplish color, that would indicate a case of poisoning by salicylic acid. So this was Lee-Jones test. In short, you should know that it is, you can differentiate it for diagnosing cyanide poisoning or aspirin poisoning. Then there's a ferric chloride test. Again, if you just add in the urine, this is done in urine, aspirin can be detected there by addition of a few drops of ferric chloride. And if the color changes into a violet or a purplish color, then it is a case of salicylic poisoning. And you can see the plasma salicylate levels and the prothrombin levels and hypokalemia. You can see the serum potassium levels and all that. Then how you treat it? The gastric lavage is of some benefit, even though the several hours may have elapsed, because you see the tablets of salicylate, they cake together into a mass. So that if it forms, it can delay the gastric absorption and the emptying. So the blood levels may continue to rise for several hours after ingestion. So like people say, that it is never too late to wash out the stomach in case of salicylate poisoning. If gastric lavage is carried out, it is done with warm water. There we said warm water is not to be used in case of oxalic acid, but here warm water can be used. And some quantity of 5% sodium bicarbonate is left in the stomach to combat the acidosis. Then forced alkaline diuresis, peritoneal dialysis, hemodialysis can be useful. You can do exchange transfusion in very severe cases. Then make sure that you have the electrolyte balance in check, because there is a lot of potassium loss, there is a lot of hypokalemia. So intravenous fluids are required to counter the effect of dehydration from vomiting and sweating and all that. Vitamin K should be given if there is abnormal sort of bleeding, you can say, and blood or platelet transfusions can be sometimes helpful also. So if we go on, forced alkaline diuresis can be done, but do not administer acetazolamide to alkaline edema is also quite common there, pulmonary and cerebral edema. The medico-legal importance is, again, like we said, it can be accidental in children, but like we said, it is rare now because of the use of acetaminophen, which is paracetamol. And as it is an over-the-counter drug, so a lot of household carry the aspirin. So common accidental fatalities can occur. Also suicidal purpose also, because it is easily available and it can be used as a suicidal poisoning, but not all that common nowadays. Homicidal is also extremely rare. So moving on now, we have finished with the acids and all that. We come on to the alkalis. You know, alkalis, there are a number of alkaline corrosives, but here we'll only discuss some of the important ones in detail. The rest will do just the salient features. Like if you remember, like acids, we discussed that strong acids, strong alkalis also, they act as corrosives and they act as irritants if they are taken in the diluted form. So that you have to remember. And if we see the mechanism of action, they generally contain the hydroxyl group, which on dissociation in water, they produce the hydroxide ions, the OH group. When the poison comes in contact with the GIT, and how it acts, if you remember, the acids, usually the mechanism of action was by a process of coagulative necrosis, and there was a conversion of hemoglobin into hemetin in acids, and there was a lot of extraction of water causing dehydration and desiccation. Here, the reverse. In alkalis, remember, the mechanism of action is through the process of liquefaction necrosis. There it was like what? Coagulative necrosis. Here in alkalis, it is liquefaction necrosis. There is a saponification of fat, there is solubilization of proteins, and protein structure is disrupted. So because of this disruption layer, this allows a deep penetration into the tissues by an alkali, and unlike the acids, the alkalis produce extensive penetrating damage. So if someone asks you what is more damaging, a strong acid or a strong alkali, so immediately you would say a strong alkali is much more damaging. Why? Because it causes a saponification of fat, the protein disruption, which allows the alkalis to penetrate deep inside the tissues. The pathogenesis of injury rapidly is progressive, and it may extend to weeks even after the onset. If you remember, in our last lecture, we discussed that acids, they have a more serious effect on the lining of the stomach, which was a columnar epithelium. But in case of alkali poisoning, severe effects of corrosion will be seen in the lining of the esophagus. So if you see the stricture formation, which is as a result of complication that you see, that will be more common in alkalis, while acids, especially the sulfuric acid, would result in perforation of the stomach. And that you have to remember. There's more perforation of the stomach in cases of acids, especially the sulfuric acid, while alkalis, they have a more serious effects on the esophageal lining, and there will be more stricture formation seen at the lower end of the esophagus with alkalis. Now, if we see the uses of alkalis, the alkalis are usually present in a number of household products as drain cleaners, as oven cleaners, as dishwashers, and as paint strippers, and also in the industry, especially in the manufacturing of soap, you can see. Now, if we come to the physical appearance, first the physical appearance, most of these, they occur as a white crystalline powder form, especially the potassium and the sodium carbonates, or they can occur in form of translucent, hard crystalline mass, which is the ammonium carbonate. It comes in that form. Or it can occur as an irritant gas if it is ammonia. And ammonia, when it is dissolved in water, it will form a strong solution of ammonia, which is usually a colorless, pungent liquid. So these were some of the types of alkalis. Sign and symptoms, if we see, there is usually a caustic taste, that is a very, you can say, a very acrid and a soapy taste in the mouth if you consume alkalis. And there'll be a sensation of burning heat from the throat to the esophagus. The vomited material also is alkaline and does not effervesce on contact with the ground. The vomitus, usually it is at first very thick and it is very slimy. Later it is dark because of the altered blood and shreds of mucosa. There will be a lot of purging and straining. There will be a lot of abdominal pain, and stool usually consists of, you can say, mucus and blood and all that. The affected skin or the mucosa is usually grayish in color. And it has a very slimy feeling because we say that there's a lot of saponification, there's a lot of conversion into soapy sort of a substance. So soap gives a slimy sort of a texture to the mucosa. So there'll be a slimy or a soapy feel to the mucosa, and usually it is grayish, somewhat grayish in color. Like we said earlier, there'll be a lot of esophageal stricture formation, especially at the lower end. And this is a major long-time complication of alkali poisoning. We talked a little about ammonia gas here. It is also comes under alkali. So if ammoniacal vapors are inhaled, there'll be a lot of congestion and watering of the eyes, a lot of sneezing, coughing, choking, and sudden collapse and death may occur from suffocation. Obviously, the fumes are very irritating. They will irritate the mucous membrane, and there'll be a lot of constriction and edema leading to suffocation and all that. Fatal dose is usually, although it is very varied, from 5 to 20 grams. It can be that much. Treatment, if we deal about the treatment, we can say that you can do usually stomach wash, gastric lavage, and emesis here also is contraindicated because also the mucous membrane, it is very soft and you can easily perforate the esophageal lining. So usually stomach wash is to be avoided, also the emesis. Neutralization can be done with a weak vinegar or lemon juice. Also, demulcents like milk or egg white beaten can be used, which will again form a mucoprotective layer and it will save the mucous membrane from further corrosion and erosion. In poisoning by ammoniacal vapors, oxygen inhalation is usually given. If there is esophageal strictures as a result of complication, it can be dilated by means of a boogie. Corticosteroids, they can be of certain use. They can be helpful in limiting the stricture formation, progress of the stricture formation. and prevention of strictures if it is done at an earlier stage, if it is started at an earlier stage, so it can somehow prevent these strictures from forming or progressing. So prednisone can be given. Skin lesions, if they are there, they are washed with water or treated with dilute vinegar or lemon juice or all that. Several days, weak antibiotic can be given. Okay. Then splashing of the eyes, if the eyes are affected, with copious amount of water or a buffer solution can be done. The post-mortem appearance, if we see, there are marks about the mouth which become dark in color. They are parchment-like after erosion. This liminess, like we said, because it is a soapy, gives a soapy touch feeling to the mucosa. There is a lot of sliminess of the tissues of the esophagus and the stomach, more so, like we said, of the squamous epithelium of the esophagus. And mucosa may be of a brownish color due to the formation of alkali hematin. Stenosis, like we said, or stricture formation is also more common of the lower end of the esophagus. Then if we talk about the medico-legal importance, then accidental poisoning can occur with alkali solution because they can usually placed in ordinary bottles kept at home. They are not labeled correctly and they are mistakenly consumed thinking it to be water or lemonade or anything like that. Then industrial accidents can occur from time to time because of its use in the industry. Suicidal and homicidal ingestion also, again, it is quite rare. So this was about it. We have done all that. And if we again give you a small recap of the previous lecture, like we said, if we have time, we'll give you a small recap. And we said features differentiating sulfuric acid from nitric acid and hydrochloric acid. You can say that sulfuric acid, the characteristic finding of sulfuric acid would be a trickling marks seen from the chin, mouth, from the angle of the mouth to the front of the chest and the abdomen. And that there'll be a lot of erosion and corrosion of the mucous membrane of the tongue, which will be swollen, the mucous membrane of the mouth, angle of mouth. In case of sulfuric acid, there'll be blackening of the mucous membrane because of the excoriation, eschar formation. And there'll be a chalky white teeth, which is brittle, and the loss of polishing effect in case of sulfuric acid. While in nitric acid, there'll be a yellow coating of the mucous membrane. And this yellow coating, if you remember, we said this is because whenever the concentrated nitric acid, it comes in contact with the organic matter, it forms picric acid. And picric acid is responsible for giving the yellowish tinge to the mucous membrane in case of nitric acid poisoning. So there will be a lot of yellow discoloration, and also there are a lot of fumes emitting from ingestion of nitric acid and hydrochloric acid. So it will cause a lot of laryngeal spasm and respiratory symptoms. While in case of hydrochloric acid, we said that usually the corrosion, erosion is not that much, but usually the epidermis may fall off and leaving a brown parchmentization of the skin. And this also the stomach in case of hydrochloric acid would contain a lot of brownish fluid. And also here also, because it is a very fuming acid, so there'll be a lot of respiratory symptoms seen in hydrochloric acid. So these were some of the differentiating features. And like we said, gastric lavage and emesis are to be avoided and all that in cases of acid. Then we talked about vitriolage. Vitriolage, we said, was acid throwing mainly on the face to cause the disfigurement. And this disfigurement usually because oil of vitriol, which is the name of sulfuric acid, because this acid is commonly used, that's why it was named as vitriolage, although other acids can also be used for this purpose. And vitriolage, if you see, to cause disfigurement, according to the Qisas and Diyat ordinance, the penalty for that comes under the heading of Itlaf-e Salayat-e Udu. That is the penalty for vitriolage, Itlaf-e Salayat-e Udu, which is PPC, Pakistan Penal Code 335. According to that, and Itlaf-e Salayat-e Udu, in very simple words, is if someone destroys or permanently impairs the functioning power or the capacity of an organ of the body or causes permanent disfiguration, then the penalty according to Qisas and Diyat would be itlaf-e-salayat-e udu in cases of vitriolage. So this was as far as this was concerned. Then we talked about carbolic acid. Carbolic acid, like you said, also it formed sort of, you could say, a bleaching effect. It has a typical phenolic odor, and it because it forms, give a hardening, leathery texture to the stomach. That's why this is one of the exception where you can use, do stomach lavage, gastric lavage in case of poisoning by carbolic acid, because the stomach is hardened and it gives a leathery texture to the stomach. And also one more important thing in carbolic acid was that the sign and symptoms of carbolic acid poisoning is known as carbolism, the poisoning by carbolic acid, and the sign and symptoms that appear is known as carbolism. That was one of the important feature of that. The other thing which was important was an effect called carboluria in carbolic acid poisoning. And what is carboluria? It was just the metabolic products of carbolic acid, which was hydroquinone and pyrocatechol. Both, when they are excreted in the urine, they, on standing or being exposed to air, they are oxidized, causing the urine to become dark, smoky green or olive green in color. And this is a very characteristic finding in case of carbolic acid poisoning, which is known as carboluria. Then the chronic poisoning by carbolic acid, which is known as phenol or carbol merismus, that gives you a case of ochronosis. This is also a very important finding of ochronosis in carbolic acid poisoning, where there is dark pigmentation or a bluish black discoloration of the cornea and the various cartilages, especially the ear cartilage and the ligaments. They are all colored. So they are known as ochronosis. This is because of chronic poisoning by carbolic acid. So this, we are just giving you a recap of the previous lecture. That's why I'm giving you just the salient features. And this ochronosis is not seen with everyone. Usually it is seen with, associated with alkaptonuria, which is autosomal recessive metabolic disorder. So these were some of the important findings of all those poisonings which we did last time. Today we started off with oxalic acid, and we did that in detail also. The oxalic acid we did in detail. We did the aspirin salicylic acid, and we did alkalis. So I hope everything has been made very clear, and I've tried to make it very concise, very simple, so that you can all follow it. And even though if you have any queries, any questions, you can mail me, or you can ask me in my office. You can come there, or you can put the question on in the mail. So that was all for today. Hopefully we'll be meeting you again with any other lecture. Okay. So.